Alright, so today I want to tell you the difference between a high quality ball python and a low quality ball python. And the snake around my neck that is choking me out, this is Bobby here. He is probably one of the highest quality bamboos that I have seen. I don't know what's gotten into Bobby. He just decided to choke me out today. It's so funny. And as a matter of fact, I actually bought a whole collection of female ball pythons. Someone was getting out of it. And it's funny because he got out of it as soon as his females were 3 years old and ready to breed. It's like, why would you spend so much time working on your females and then for some reason, I don't know, life circumstances or whatever, he actually got out of it and sold his collection to actually someone else, and then I bought it from him kind of like a snake broker, I guess you would say. And I was looking for actually a really high-end male to breed to a lot of those females, and I was looking around at my local reptile shows and some of the stuff that was local here, and really no one had ever really worked with bamboo a lot. This is a bamboo ball python here, Bobby, around my neck. As a matter of fact, I went over to Morph Market. I was looking for a bamboo. I said, all right, I want a bamboo. I'm going to narrow it down to the males that are ready to breed within just a few months. So it had to have some size to it. And pretty much, if you look over at the bamboos over on Morph Market, some of them do not look like this snake. Let me tell you, some of them are really washed out. Some of them are really kind of a grayed out bamboo, and I paid probably double for Bobby. I paid $1,200 for Bobby, and it was at the time I think they were selling between, I'd say $400 and $500. I could get a mature male bamboo, and this one was way above the top. It was quite a bit bigger, but you know, the pictures on this bamboo, I just couldn't believe how impressive this snake was compared to all the other bamboos over on Morph Market. So actually it was really tough at the time because I was just starting in ball pythons, investing in snakes and racks. All the money was going into the hobby. I wasn't getting anything out, and I scraped up the $1,200 and actually bought Bobby. And let me tell you, it paid off, because essentially what you're doing is you're reproducing this snake into a whole bunch of other snakes. And I probably had at least 50 or 60 bamboos produced from Bobby here, and let me tell you, that definitely paid the $1,200 plus some. It was definitely a worthwhile investment. So what I'm going to do today is I want to show you on the internet some of the differences between a high quality ball python and a low quality ball python. Alright, so I'm going to start over here and jump back and forth between the world of ball pythons and Morph Market, and I want to pretty much just show you single ball python morphs without anything else mixed in, and I want to show you the differences between pretty much what we consider a high quality and a low quality ball python. Essentially what it is it's multiple lines of the same morph that really people don't distinguish between the different lines. For example, we have the axanthic line like VPI and the TSK, two completely separate lines of axanthic, and I would say in most cases, actually pretty much across the board, every single morph that I've looked at, it looks like there are different lines, but we just don't really distinguish the different lines by naming them and keeping them separate in a lot of cases. So I'm going to start over here on the Super Orange Dream. I've seen some huge differences in not only the visual appearance of the Super Orange Dreams, but also the prices. So if you actually get a really low intensity Super Orange Dream, this is essentially what it looks like. And this one's actually for sale. Actually, I was looking at the price over here. It's actually for sale for $400. And a lot of times, if you have something that's not really that impressive of a line, it's really priced accordingly in a lot of cases, where people will price these a little bit lower. They'll get a really high intensity line, and that one will sell, instead of hundreds of dollars, it'll sell for thousands of dollars. The same exact genes in the ball python, but you're looking at one versus the other, and it all comes down to pretty much what, you know, some people say low quality versus high quality, and really what it comes down to is different lines have different visual impacts as far as what you can expect from certain morphs. So this is kind of the low intensity, and take a look at this. This is the high intensity Orange Dream. It was actually first developed by Ozzy Boyds, which is it's almost, you look at his collection and it's pretty amazing to see some of his Super Orange Dream stuff. It is unlike any other Super Orange Dream I've seen, and that is really where all the Super Orange Dream originated. It's pretty awesome. So another thing is, this is actually really obvious in my collection. I've been breeding a lot of stuff with pastel, and it's funny because when you start out, you're buying all these snakes that have pastel in the mix, and you don't really know what kind of pastel is in these mixed genes. A lot of times you'll buy a snake with like 3 or 4 or 5 genes all mixed together, and you really don't know what the individual genes look like until you start breeding them out. And I've actually seen some really high intensity pastels as well as some really low intensity pastels hatching out of my collection. I'd say this is a really low intensity. This is kind of like a washed out, kind of a muddy looking pastel. I'd say there's a lot of pastels that probably 50% of them kind of look like this, just a little bit washed out. And also keep in mind, pastels also fade as they get older. They're usually brighter when they're young, so you can definitely tell on this one, even though it's a hatchling, it's still pretty dull and muddied out. I actually have some female pastels that are adults that don't look really yellow anymore. I'm thinking they probably started like this when they were young. And here is a super high intense pastel. I actually hatched some out this year as bright as this, and I'm definitely gonna hold those back as future breeders. It's pretty amazing the difference between the low intensity and the high intensity pastels. So actually, when I first got into bamboos, I was looking at a lot of snakes over at Morph Market, and this is what most of them looked like. It was pretty amazing. They were all kind of grayed out and washed out. And let me tell you, I have never produced a snake that looks like this from Bobby. He's produced quite a few snakes. I'd say every year he produces at least 12 to 15, maybe 20. I think the first year I maybe produced 30 or 40 bamboos, and I think I'm actually changing the whole scene when it comes to bamboo ball pythons. I'm putting a lot of really high quality animals out there. A lot of people are breeding them, and it's really increasing the quality of the bamboos across the board. I thought that was pretty interesting. You don't really see bamboos like this anymore, and usually what I expect is something like this, really high intense, almost a silvery kind of a color with I mean, it's night and day compared to some of the bamboos that I've seen out there. So when it comes to spider is a dominant morph. You can actually mix it with other genes. 50% of the babies come out spider. And the spider is really interesting. It's a little bit polymorphic, but I wouldn't say a whole lot. You get little variations between different snakes. And on this particular snake, it's kind of interesting. This one actually has a low amount of white coming up the belly. Sometimes you see more or less white. And it also has these bands, like a repeating band coming down the side, which is kind of interesting. It's a different visual appearance than some of the spiders that I've seen. And you could probably argue exactly if this is high quality or low quality, depending on what you're actually gonna do with that snake. So for example, if you bred calico and you wanted a really high white calico, you might wanna think about getting a different line of spider that actually has more white in the sides. So compare this snake to this snake over here. I would say they're both really visually impressive snakes. The spider's a really impressive standalone morph, but this one, it looks completely totally different. It has more white coming up the sides, and it doesn't have the bands coming down the sides of the snake. And the interesting thing is if you actually mix a spider with a pastel, you get a bumblebee. It's a really impressive snake, and really the bumblebee, the visual appearance of the bumblebee looks completely different from snake to snake, and I think it really depends on which line of pastel and which line of spider that you're actually mixing together to produce that snake. It's pretty incredible how the visual appearance of some of these combos goes back to the quality of the individual genes. So this is an Enchi. This is probably the lowest quality Enchi that I can find over on Morph Market. And usually Enchi reduces the pattern. Usually it reduces the alien heads, and sometimes it'll increase the yellow and the brightness. I would say this almost looks like a normal ball python. Sometimes you can almost hardly tell the difference between Enchi and a normal. And I pulled up a really high prime example of an Enchi. This is what I would expect an Enchi to look like. Almost have a super reduced pattern, almost banded, and then have like a yellow or kind of an orangish yellow kind of shining through. And that is the difference between what I would consider a high quality Enchi and a low quality Enchi. So So the clown's kind of interesting because I've seen a lot of polymorphism in clowns, and it seems to be line dependent. And I wouldn't say when it comes to clown that it's really high quality or low quality. I would say it's just different, and it really depends on what you consider is attractive, I guess you'd say, in a snake. What really appeals to you when you're making your combos. And I would say most clowns, the typical clown kind of looks like this, where it has almost little alien heads kind of raking through. It's a recessive morph. And when I first got into clowns, I didn't think they were that impressive, but you start mixing it with a lot of combos, and let me tell you, the clown is really probably the recessive king of combos. Mixes really well with a lot of genes. And this one has a lot of busyness to it, and if you compare that one to something like this, where it's almost super reduced, you almost have this, it's reduced down to a line. This almost looks like a blade clown since it's such reduced, but it's actually not being sold as a blade clown. Sometimes you can see a lot of pattern on the sides, and sometimes there's just a little, and it seems to be more or less line dependent. I know you can get a little bit of variation in your clowns in the same clutch. So the pied is, I would say you can actually have high quality pieds and low quality pieds, and most people consider a low white pied low quality. As a matter of fact, the prices pretty much reflect, you know, how much you're gonna actually sell the snake for, depending on the amount of white. And it used to be a lot of the pieds, if it was really high white, it just had a little bit of color on it, they could get a really high price. And now it's pretty much, I'd say it's almost changed to where more people find pretty much 50-50 white and color almost more visually appealing than the really high white pieds, which is kind of interesting. So this is, I would say, you could probably get, you know, a couple $100 for that. And then you look at something like this, and these, well, I would say it's probably almost double in price for something that is really impressive. Is this a lot of white? I'd say the 50-50s are really probably in the highest demand. As a matter of fact, a lot of them have little smiley faces on the sides. If you actually get a smiley face, you could probably increase the price by another $100 just because it's visually pleasing. A lot of people like to see the little emojis, smiley faces on their pied ball pythons. So the VPI is another one that just really kind of blows me away. So we actually have different lines of VPI. We have the TSK, there's actually, I think there's 4 lines of Axanthic, then maybe 5 lines. I know the TSK is probably one of the most popular, right alongside of the VPI Axanthic, pretty much the 2 most popular lines. And the thing that blows me away, that even in the VPI line, I've seen some major differences in the visual appearance. So essentially what the Axanthic does is it strips out all the color of the snake, so you end up usually with blacks and whites and silvers. You can see on this one there's quite a bit of color still coming through. As a matter of fact, I've seen some lines that almost look like a normal ball python. It's so unbelievable. And when I think of a really high quality VPI Axanthic, this is what I'm thinking of right here. It is a really black and silver snake. I mean, the difference between these is night and day. As a matter of fact, I've actually seen some people on YouTube videos, and they'll pick up their VPI Axanthic and start talking about the Axanthic, and I'm like, is that really a VPI? Did you pick up the right snake? It's pretty amazing the differences in, I would consider this a really high quality line of VPI Axanthic. So this kind of blows me. I'm actually working on Desert Ghosts, and I was trying to pull up like a high quality and a low quality Desert Ghost, just the straight Desert Ghost by itself. And I've actually seen some Desert Ghosts. It's actually a recessive mutation. It's not usually that impressive by itself, but you start mixing it with other genes and you get some really impressive snake. And normally I would say it's not really a bright yellow color. As a matter of fact, I've seen quite a few bright yellow, just straight Desert Ghosts on Morph Market. That really surprised me, because this is what I would think that a typical high quality Desert Ghost looks like. Usually it's like the base template where you can mix other genes on top. It really sharpens and intensifies the contrast, but this usually doesn't necessarily add a lot of color. So I thought it was a huge difference between that bright yellow one and this one. And then I found another one here that's kind of in the middle between the two. It's not as bright yellow, and it doesn't really have the high contrast. So I thought it was really interesting that people are calling all of these Desert Ghosts and they look completely different. That just really surprised me. So here's another one that also surprised me, and some of these, it's like, which one is high quality and which one's low quality? I would say a lot of times it's just different. It's not really high versus low. It's one versus the other, and sometimes it's obvious when you're looking for a really bright snake that it's a high quality. But I'd say the Pinstripe, this one kind of surprised me as well. This is pretty much what all my Pinstripes look like when I'm hatching them out. They all look like this. And here is another Pinstripe. Take a look at this. This one actually has a really bright line right down the back, which I thought was interesting. I've actually seen some Pinstripes like this that are quite a bit different than the Pinstripes I produce. And this one is also interesting. So you can see on this one, it doesn't really have the really strong line down the back, and it looks like it's even a lot golder than the ones that I'm producing. This is, I'd say this is probably, in my opinion, this is the high quality Pinstripe versus the other ones. But I think a lot of it just comes down to what your taste is in Pinstripe ball pythons. So here's another one. This is the Calico, and I would say the Calico, there's some really extreme differences. Calico, what it does is it brings up white on the side of the snake. Sometimes it'll bring up a lot of white. Sometimes it'll bring just a little white. You can see just a little bit just kind of breaking through. As a matter of fact, when I look at some of these Calicos, I'm like, is that the right snake? Is that actually a Calico? I would consider this an extreme low quality Calico because you can almost not even tell it's Calico. And here is what I would consider a high quality Calico. Bringing up a lot of white on the snake, bringing a lot of the color up to the top. This is a really impressive snake. So the Coral Glow can actually trick you. The Coral Glow and the banana are essentially the same thing. Two lines of the same snake discovered by two different people pretty much at the same time. One called him Coral Glow, the other one called him banana, essentially the same snake. And the thing that really tricks you is actually when I bought my very first Coral Glow, I was looking through all the pictures of the hatchlings, and I was looking for the brightest, most contrasty snake with some really highlights and something like this. As a matter of fact, mine looked so much better than this. It was unbelievable. And then when I actually got it in the mail, it didn't look anything like this snake. It was so disappointing. The thing with the Coral Glows is they go through a major transformation going from hatchlings to adults. So I'd say almost every hatchling that you see is really impressive and bright. Sometimes it has a lot of different colors in it. And then pretty much all of them, when they grow up, they pretty much look like this. They all kind of lose all the really bright colors and they kind of fade out to like a two-tone yellow. And the interesting thing is a lot of times some of them will have a lot of spots, like these little freckles all through them. Some of them will have just a few freckles. And depending on, sometimes you can actually mix banana and Coral Glow with certain morphs to completely eliminate the freckles, which I thought was pretty interesting. So I have a couple snakes over here. These are actually the ones that I purchased this year. This particular snake right here, I actually put a down payment on. It actually has 6 genes in there. This is Pastel, Calico, Banana, Anchi, Butter, and Yellow Belly. And the hard part about a snake like this is, especially if you're buying it from someone on Morph Market, a breeder you're not really familiar with, or maybe a breeder that's really big, maybe they may have a lot of different lines of each individual gene. And you don't know, looking at this snake, for example, the Calico, you almost can't even see any Calico in here. The orange kind of comes up halfway and stops. And I'm thinking, all right, is the orange, the Calico coming through because of the 5 other genes on top of it? Or is it just a little bit of white, a really low quality? And I would say in most cases, you really can't tell unless you're really familiar with some of these combos, if it's a really intense line of Calico or not. You can definitely see the banana, I'd say as far as banana or Coral Glows, you really can't have a high quality or low quality. They pretty much all end up looking pretty much the same. You can definitely tell there's a lot of color in this one just because it is a hatchling. But you really can't tell if it's a good line of Yellow Belly or Butter. The Anchi kind of reduces the size. I can kind of see the reduction in the Anchi, but you really don't know if it's from the Anchi or from the 5 other genes actually acting on the pattern as well. So I'd say if you're buying a multi-gene animal, you're taking some risk as far as determining if it's high quality or low quality. And for me, I just wanted to take my normal females, breed it with something like this, and get a whole rainbow of different colored snakes. And if I find out, hey, there's not really any good quality calico in here, I can actually breed this to my calico, which is a really high expression calico, and then hopefully one of the babies will have the 5 genes and then plus the really nice calico, and I can actually reproduce this with adding another line of a really intense calico. So here's another gene, another snake. I actually bought this one this year. This is the second one I invested in. This is probably the most expensive snake that I've ever bought in my entire collection. And let me tell you, it's going to pay off because I have 2 female clowns that are just waiting for this boy. And I'm definitely going to start breeding them up here in about 2 weeks. I'm going to start pairing them up. This is actually a banana Enchi clown. And the clown is recessive. The interesting thing is he mix banana with clown, and it pretty much wipes out all the freckles of the banana, and it pretty much keeps the same color. It doesn't really fade that much as it matures. I've seen some really interesting banana clowns. And then you throw Enchi on top, and you can tell it's a really nice line of Enchi because it's really reducing the pattern. So in some cases you can actually see that it's having an effect with multiple genes, but I would say in most cases you really can't tell if you have a high quality or a low quality gene in your snake. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And John Como asks, if I try to feed a rodent to my ball python and it doesn't eat it, is it okay to put it in the refrigerator and try again the next day? And I would say most people actually frown on that. Remember, you're keeping the rodents in your freezer, you're thawing them out, and then you're warming them up to about 100 degrees before you offer them. And then I would say actually, if you keep it beyond the initial heating period, it's not really sanitary. I would definitely not refreeze. I would definitely not put it in the refrigerator and feed it the next day. Although I've seen some people do it, but probably the best way I would approach that is to find something else that will eat those rodents. And when I started out in ball pythons, I actually had some king snakes that would eat the smaller ones. They would eat every single time versus, you know, ball pythons are really picky. And then I got my reticulated pythons, and those things would eat every single rodent from every snake that ate, and it's pretty much never wasted a rodent until they got so big that even my largest rats are almost too small for my big retics. So then pretty much what I went to is a slightly different strategy where I'll just feed half my snakes at a time, and if I feed half of them, just out enough rodents just for half of them. If some of those don't eat, I'll move to the other half and feed them, and kind of cycle through that way every few days, feed just half my snakes. And then it's been a few days since some of them have eaten that you fed the first time, then you can actually double up, and hopefully you'll never waste a rodent. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.